do shows with a cold open do better and get more watch time? Let's find out. All right, welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5. We are live. That is our official first ever cold open. I'm glad you enjoyed that artistic genius. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on the audio side of the Going for Two Live. We are a Dynasty football, fantasy football podcast on the Going for Two Live network. And if you're watching here on the videos, whether that's YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, do the things, the like, the commenting, the subscribing, and all that jazz. I'm Brian Ford, and as always, or as most of the time, with my my co-host Josh Walker. Josh, how you doing?
Doing great. It finally feels like it's football season again. Scott Fish Bowl's starting off. Redraft leagues are starting to pick up. I'm actually going to DC tomorrow to do a live draft with Jeff, Joe Bond, some other cool people. So yeah, excited for that. Excited to talk running backs. There's definitely a lot to talk about. A lot's changing, so.
Yeah, right on. It's we're moving. The fantasy football or NFL calendar dead zone is interesting because it's like the peak of the ratio of speculation to actual information. And like last year, it just kind of drove me nuts, and this year I just kind of have been letting it just kind of like not really get to me too much. That kind of thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I feel like outside of like the cringy Twitter threads that are like, this is what I found these people, this is what you'll get this year. Besides that, it's really not been that bad to me as compared to last year. I think a lot of people kind of got tired of it, and it's just very few people just looking for clicks doing it.
The thing is, if you'll allow me to get on the soapbox already, like a couple of years ago, I remember we were making fun of these Twitter threads that were like, 5 blah, 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 just read below, and you're going to unlock and dominate, and it's like, okay, but like, what do y'all's thumbnails and YouTube titles sound like now, a couple of years later?
Yeah, it's all the same.
Shut the fuck up, you know what I mean?
Like, they were just ahead of it, actually.
The SE overlords have gotten to everybody. As Josh alluded to, we're going to be talking about running backs tonight for those of you who may not remember or are new to our millions of fans. We do lists of 5 for the Dynasty Fantasy Football topic of the night. And tonight we're going to look at 5 backfields that we find intriguing for one way or for one reason or another. Before we get to that, any kind of overall thoughts on the running back landscape in 2025, how it's changed or changing, and how you're kind of looking at the approach here?
I think it's kind of just confirming what we've been saying, that I don't feel like the bell cow running backs are quite as common. The way teams are getting more running backs, they feel like each team has 2 or 3 guys that you could see getting 20 to 30% of the touches without it being too surprising. Now, there's still some bell cow backs, like even Genty. They got Raheem Mostert there. I figure he's going to get plenty of touches also. But there are still some bell cows out there, so you got to find those and get them early. But besides that, the running back landscape is not nearly as bleak as it was. I've gotten really rigid in how I handle running backs in Dynasty, especially startups. I used to just kind of go with it, but the more I've played, I've kind of learned some things that I'm trying to be more rigid on when I never am about anything in my life. I don't have any strict structure or anything. I'm actually trying to for fantasy football to see how that works.
So rigid in which way? Like rigid on waiting, or rigid on like, these people are fools, I'll take Derrick Henry?
Rigid in the sense of like, if I'm in a startup, I'm going to try and draft a top 5 running back, like a young guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, someone who's young, I can still get 5 years out of. And if I don't get one of those guys, I'm getting guys like Charbonnet's, the backups, the tier like 36 through 50 of mine. And then I'm getting veterans that fall late, like James Conner. James Conner is one of my favorite targets if you're trying to compete. James Conner, Aaron Jones, guys like that who I know will get plenty of touches, Alvin Kamara even. Guys like that. So I'm getting young running backs with upside that might not have the potential, or I'm getting vets. And then if I'm competing, It's just kind of the same.
Yeah.
I totally just blanked right there. What I was about to say, but
That's cool. Hey man, you know what? When you're ripping bong hits before the show. Oh wait. So for me, the landscape in 2025, just a quick thought that I had the other day was sort of, because I'm in the best ball streets, and there's a lot of conversation about how zero RB kind of failed last year,
yeah,
and like, how much of that is attributable to sort of last year being, for one degree or another, deviation or variance. I don't want to say like an aberration or an outlier because that's maybe a little too strong, but variance. The running backs did better than they used to. The running backs stayed healthier. RB2 scored better, and that meant that older guys were staying healthier and filling in those RB2 slots, and they were scoring better. And the wide receiver injury ratio was different than it used to be, et cetera. And so, I think you can overreact to that and call it like a running back renaissance. But at the same time, how much of that is attributable to, changes in the NFL, where for the first time in a long time, run plays were positive EPA, and and the increased focus on the run game, particularly like a power run game in some places, to take advantage of these lighter defenders, lighter boxes, etc. And the nature of turning points by definition is it's hard to say they're a turning point until the stuff that came after. But I wonder, with the infusion of the 2025 rookie class now on top of that, are we now in a space where we have to, I don't say fundamentally, but rethink running back a little bit from how we had it the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I think you have to. And I remember the thought. And if I'm rebuilding, I don't want a single running back that's over 24 on my team. I only want rookies or guys that I think once they get the opportunity, I can trade. And if I do have older guys, I'm definitely, as soon as they have a good game with 2 touchdowns or 100 yards, I'm trying to sell them. Because used to in rebuilds, I'd try and hang on to like a 25, 26-year-old running back, being like, okay, I can compete when he's 29. But I've kind of learned that those players tend to just die on my roster. So in rebuilds, I don't want anyone, I just want either rookies or young guys that I think can, when they get the shot, can really grow, and I can get like a second-round pick for someone I got in the 3rd or 4th. Kind of like that. But yeah, I do think we got to change how we look at running backs. If you look at it, guys like Najee Harris, bigger backs had a lot more efficiency than some of the smaller backs, and I think that is due to the smaller defenses, lighter boxes, and just how the defensive play. So I'm kind of interested to see how that goes, because Derrick Henry had a career year, 1,900 yards at 30. So I'm kind of interested to see, how that all changes.
By the way, do you know that he? Okay, so I saw a tweet that he spends $260,000 or something on his body throughout the year, whatever, chef and weight training and all that. And the tweet was that was a lot of money, and I'm like, considering the money he has and the shape he's in, I would have totally thought he spent more than that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's less than I thought, honestly.
All right, so before we get to our list of backfields, today's show, I think, still is sponsored by Underdog. We have a deposit match where if you go to underdog.com or the Underdog app and you use the promo code GF2 and you're a new account, you can get some amount of deposit match back. I don't know exactly what our amount is at the moment because I forgot to ask Jeff, as a very irresponsible host of this podcast. If you're watching here on the video stream, you can scan the QR code, do your thing. Underdog is not just the best ball. They've got the DFS, they've got the pick'ems if you're in certain states. They've got other sports besides football, baseball, WNBA, college football, and all that. So give it a shot. I think it's fun. It's a good platform. I draft on it periodically throughout the summer. It's a fun way to kind of see how the market's shifting and kind of also different ways to diversify my bets, right? Because if I've got, for example, I don't have much Omarion Hampton in Dynasty relative to maybe some other rookie running backs, right? So, all right, now if I'm going to make money off Hampton, right, I'm going to lean into him a little bit higher exposure in, say, some best ball tournaments, that kind of thing. So, fun way to kind of differentiate your fantasy football activity. So yeah, go to underdog.com or the Underdog app. Use promo code GF2. Start playing. Maybe even start winning. All right. So the high-end graphics department, known as my Google slides, are going to be the basis of our conversation tonight. Let's see here. This is giving me some kind of error message. All right, there we go. All right, let me pull that up. It's a little bigger. All right. So as I left out of the intro, this is our episode 69. So welcome to the nice episode. We're going to take a look at 5 intriguing backfields. For each backfield, we're going to take a look at. I have, their main guys in the depth chart, some of the rankings in ADP. We're just going to kind of chop it up at like what we see happening with these backfields as we lead up to training camp coming up in a couple weeks. Looking back on our old show sheets, we got 4 episodes out of backfields last offseason. We're going to try to do 1 or 2 more after this one, but definitely wanted to make sure that we at least did one. So just some things that we think about, or that I think about when kind of trying to come up with like, how do I have this conversation? What is the point of trying to like solve, quote unquote, or figure out these backfields? And I think it boils down to who's getting what kind of touches and how many, right? And like, how do you even come about with that answer? I mean, some of it is player take, and some of it, right, is knowing coaching schemes and things like that. Whatever, like there's a lot of factors into that. But I think one thing that we have to do is find that right balance between what we think will happen, like what's our prediction, right, and what we know can happen. I think sometimes fantasy football folks lean a little too much into the what we think will happen, right? But knowing what can happen, I think, is often a better way of looking at things, knowing the full range of outcomes, right? And that I think is the first thing that we have to kind of wrap our head around. And then based on that range of outcomes, like what bets are we making and at what prices are we making them? And is the market telling us something by those prices being the same, being the way that they are in certain places? Are there inefficiencies to exploit, et cetera? And then I think it ultimately boils down to the risk reward. After we kind of like internally answer all those questions, what's the risk reward ratio, right? So for example, like Ben Gretsch talks about a player being, small hit, big miss, or small miss, big hit, right? Where is the symmetry in the upside or the downside, right? And what is the opportunity cost of making that bet in a draft, which I think is more relevant during best ball season, right? Than maybe like, maybe startups are slowing down, right? But still, there's an opportunity cost in drafting, right? And, in the way you're constructing a roster in an existing league and you're making trades, there's also opportunity costs too. Like, I could use those 2 second-round picks on this, or I can use it, on that instead, or pay less for this other player with maybe a different range of outcomes, but a higher ceiling, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think to me, this kind of stuff makes backfields really intriguing to talk about, right? It's one of my favorite things to talk about, kind of parse out, read the tea leaves, what's going to happen in these backfields. At the same time, I think it's, you have to accept the humility of like, we're not even at training camp yet, right? We're trying to figure out how can we get an early-ish edge as the training camps approach. Kind of what bets are we making and what prices are we making them at? And I think another sort of idea in the backdrop beyond this question I posed at the beginning of how much of 2024 is a turning point or not, is the way that backfields operate. I had reached out to actually Jacob Sanderson to see if he could come on. I was going to surprise you, but he was busy. And one thing that I kind of think of sometimes when I think of Backfields is sort of how he broke it down a couple of years ago. And I would not do as good a job as the way that he broke it down, but I think we have to think about, the way that touches are distributed isn't always the way that people think. And we'll get to that when we do Denver. I'll give you an example of that. And another thing to think about is, competitive advantage, right? Say, player X and player Y are your two choices for, giving touches, right? They're both, I don't know, an 8, let's say, at running between the tackles, right? But one of them is like a 2 at catching the ball, right? And the other is, say, a 6 at catching the ball. You might take the guy that's a 6 at catching the ball and make him a receiving back, even though he can run 8 between the tackles, because the other guy can't catch at all, right? So what puts you in the best advantage to give who what touches? And so that, to me, this makes it all the more just a puzzle to solve, which maybe is scratching my autistic itch. I think in a way that like wide receivers, tight ends, and shit like that, like doesn't speak to me as much.
Yep. See, I feel like that about wide receivers more. I think it's just because I'm better at evaluating wide receivers than I am running backs. Because running backs, really, man, I can really think I know and have a handle on a situation, and next week, it's just completely backwards. The guy's completely buried now in the rankings. So it's a lot harder to figure out, but I think that is where the biggest advantage is being able to get ahead of this stuff and get some of these guys before their cost really inflates.
Yeah, that's predicting like which prices are going to go up and getting in before they do. All right, so let's get started. Our first running back, our first backfield, won the Twitter poll. There was 1 or 2 backfields I know that we definitely wanted to do, and then I put a few up on the Twitter poll. And the Bears won the Twitter poll, so we're going to include them in this episode. So their backfield as it stands right now, we've got, Jamie commenting about Jacob being on JJ Zacharyason's podcast. I have that episode set aside. I'm going to listen to that when I can actually pay attention to it. Side note, the podcast opens with him talking about him being an only child and that he had like pretend leagues and players and stuff up in his head, in his imagination. And I'm like, shit, I wasn't an only child and I still did that. Like I ran away from my family and hid in my room, and like I had this whole world of imagination inside my head. But, that's a whole other story about autism and trauma and all sorts of things that we can talk about later. But speaking of trauma, Bears fans have this backfield this year, and I think we look at Swift. He's 26 years old. There's a small out in his contract after 2026. But more likely, probably he stays through 27, but who knows? I've got him ranked at RB 28 in a tier of 28 to 33. You've got him at 24. Going for 2, KTC and Fantasy Calc are 28, 27, and 25, respectively, with an ADP of 10.03, the RB 28. Roshan, Jamie's homeboy, is 24 on a rookie contract through 2026. I've got him at 55 in a tier of 51 through 57. You've got him at 51, 61, 60, and 56 on the aggregate sites, and an ADP of the 18th round, 1805 at RB 64. And then there's rookie Kyle Manungai, 7th round pick, obviously on the rookie deal through 2028. I've got him at 66 in a tier of 66 to 75. You've got him at a very nice ranking of 69. Going for 281, KTC 66 and Fantasy Calc 70, with an ADP of 20.03, the 71st running back taken in startups. Honorable mentions as being at least on the roster for now: Ian Wheeler, who I think is pretty intriguing but had an injury; Travis Homer, the homeboy, the special teams demon, and a feller by the name of Deion Hankins, who exists. And so I think The question for me is like who's getting the non-Swift touches, right? And I think we saw that Swift is there. They didn't replace him with anybody who has like a very similar skill set, so he's going to get those Swift type touches. And then of course it's who gets like the non-Swift touches. I think there's cases to be made for Roshan. There's a case to be made for Manungai in those non-Swift touches. Our friend Zara Katsabadian had a tweet the other day about how it could be both of them because Roshan's better at certain types of runs that aren't zone, whereas Manungai's better at other types of run that aren't zone, and they can just kind of like switch between that. And then, of course, there's the question: how big is the pie total? Like, what's going to be the pass rate versus the run rate? And so, what are you willing to pay for this crew? So what are your thoughts on the Bears back?
I mean, yeah, like you said, it's obviously DeAndre Swift is going to be getting the primary, most important touches. And honestly, just this offense as a whole, I actually really like, and a lot of it is because of Ben Johnson, but I think being able to get Caleb Williams in play action, design really good play action, some rollouts, some easy throws that is really catered to him. I think this whole offense is going to be able to flourish, and especially the run game, because the run game was pretty bad last year, but I think it was just because they knew they could make Caleb Williams pass the ball, and they'd probably be fine. So I think everyone on this offense is going to get a boost, and I think they're all at a really good value. I think Travis Homer is going to be kind of annoying in all of this. I see him as kind of the third one. I think he's going to be on the roster for special teams. He's also a veteran who always does what he's supposed to do. He's good in pass game, good at pass blocking. And pass blocking, I think, is what's going to tell who's going to be the main guy on passing downs between Roshan and Manungai. I think it should be Roshan. I think he's proven to be able to do both. But at the same time, it's anyone's backfield. I think the two of those will probably get like 20 to 25% of the touches, and maybe Homer might come in and get in a little bit. Yeah, they're all values. I don't know what. I think we need to talk with some of the people going for two, having him Manungai at 81. That's
Seems
I don't
low.
know if that's just one or two people that don't have him ranked, maybe by accident. But yeah, he's a really good value in rookie drafts and startups. You can get him late for nothing, and there's a good chance he could be the RB2 in this offense. And if Swift goes down, his value and Roshan's could skyrocket.
Yeah, I think everybody has him ranked, but there might be a couple people who haven't updated their rankings in a bit, and so that might have something to do with it. But it does seem low. The way I have them sorted out here at 28, 55, and 66, the story that I'm telling is Swift's the primary, especially in the sense that he's going to get chunk plays that you like, and he's going to be probably get more receiving work than the other guys. And we know that a target is worth like 2.5 points more than a carry, and I think even if he is mainly between the 20s, and he's not getting much inside the 10, inside the 5, that kind of thing, I think he can be your low end RB2 or like a flex or something like that for you. And the rest of the story is right now I think Roshan's going to get the bulk of the non-Swift touches, and Manungai's behind him until proven otherwise. I do like Manungai. I know that certain models that focus on numbers related to like receiving or explosive plays and things like that dinged him a little bit, but you hear positive coach speak about what he does, and even sometimes calling him bursty and explosive. It's a new regime, et cetera, et cetera. So I think definitely Manungai is a guy that I'm would like to have stashed on a few of my teams.
If Manungai can show that he can pick up blitzes through the offseason and training camp, I think he's really going to have a chance to take over Roshan. I didn't look at a ton of video of Manungai. I did just a little bit of research, but it seemed like he had trouble with technique sometimes in picking up blitzes at college, so that could be a problem at the NFL, and that'd be the main thing I think that would keep him off the field, because that's really important on third downs. If you're not catching the ball, keep the quarterback on his feet.
What would you be willing to pay for DeAndre Swift? because he feels like one of those guys where like the seller's going to want more than a second. We obviously don't want to give up a first.
Yeah.
So what say you?
I would do a second, and I would try and do a player that I don't really care for, but that some people might like someone who's just kind of sitting on my bench. Let me pull up my rankings here, and I can give you an actual name. If I wanted to get rid of a running back, maybe like a Trevor Etienne, one of these rookies, Ollie Gordon, someone like that, someone that is a long shot but has name value. Or I'd try and throw on I'd do a second and a late or like a later third in like years, like 27, 28 third. So I'd definitely add on to the second. I'd feel good about it, but I'm also not trying to give up anything too valuable that I might need this year.
Would you go up to 2 seconds for him?
Probably not. I probably wouldn't do that.
I'm gonna play
especially with the 27 class being so deep. If it was maybe a 28, I would maybe consider. I'd try and get something else small thrown on, like an extra fourth given back to me or something. But not straight up, probably not.
I'm going to play a clip. It's about 11 seconds long. Just in like 2-3 seconds, give me a thumbs up if you can hear this.
Okay.
You didn't hear that, right? No, okay. I got to work on the sharing the audio and that kind of thing. Anyway, it was Ben Johnson saying that Monangai has put in work, has picked up things quickly, has given attention to detail and that kind of thing. So something to think about as we approach training camp. I've sprinkled him in late in some best ball drafts, especially ones that are half PPR and not PPR, and like the 17th, 18th round. And I have a few shares, knocking around my dynasty rosters. There was some Roshan heat, some Roshan buzz earlier in this offseason as like, well, they didn't add anybody. And I think that's kind of dissipated a little bit, but like he to me has a pretty wide range of outcomes, but not in the way that it's the wide range of outcomes we usually think of. We usually talk about high variance players as being, boom bust. Like, I don't know that there's much boom, but like I could see him being an absolute total zero and Monangai completely overtaking him, or I could see him being like, a Timu version of like the Thunder Lightning kind of thing with Roshan and Swift and a guy that is relevant and useful, flexes by weeks and things like that. But I think the floor is probably the worst with Roshan. Monangai's a 7th rounder. I probably shouldn't say that.
But yeah, I know what you mean though. And coach speak, I think a lot of it is knowing each coach and what their coach speak actually means. Because Ben Johnson, you kind of see with like DJ Moore, he's not afraid to he won't say it, but you can tell when he's not happy with somebody. So him giving like actual praise to someone, I don't think it's just like blank and just for like the press. I think he actually means it because he will say if he's not happy with something. That's kind of the vibe I get at least. So yeah, that's really good that he's saying he's putting in work. Phrases like that is what coaches like, that he's actually like out there putting in a lot of effort. So
our next backfield is the Saints. I really like talking about this one. I'm not going to read all these numbers because I've got 5 guys up there, but we've got Kamara, Devin Neal, Kendre Miller, Cam Akers, and Marcus Yarns, with CEH and Velus Jones also existing. That's the order that I have them in my ranks, and that's why they're in the order on this slide. I've got Kamara at 25. You've got him at 27. Seems to be in the 20s in a lot of places. The 802 at RB23 in startups, I don't think I'm paying that price. He is 30 this month. The Saints contracts are really hard to figure out, but it looks like there's a small out after 26, and he's a UFA after 27, but they do have some of the void years even after that. Devin Neal, a guy that I was higher than consensus on coming out as a rookie. I just think he's kind of like Bucky in the sense that lower athleticism, but productive and smart and like good football player, even if like some of the numbers are different. The difference with Bucky is his peripherals as far as like missed tackles and stuff was like through the roof. But yeah, I like Devin Neal like a lot. He's just productive and reliable, and he may never hit a whole lot of home runs, but he could lead the league in doubles, that kind of thing. And I've got him at 49 in a tier of 43 through 50. You got him at 62. So you're telling a different story with that. It seems to be in the 40s and 50s in other places with your Dynasty Data Lab ADP of 1411. Kendre Miller, a guy that I wasn't big on coming out of college, but like I thought was good enough to like get some non-Kamara touches on the Saints, but just has had doghouse and injury and that kind of thing. I've got him at 68, 66 through 75. You're telling the story, I think, that you prefer Kendre over Devin Neal with a ranking of 56. Seems to be in the 60s elsewhere. 19th round in startups. To me, it's one of those things where, like, I think Neal's the better, smarter football player. I think Kendre Miller has more juice. Cam Akers was signed. Now, is that one of those things? How are we reading the tea leaves on that? Is that insurance? Or is that the team telling us we may not like much of what we see with Devin Neal and Miller, and we really want a competition there? He's a UFA after this year. I've got him right now as kind of being, fourth and possibly odd man out at running back 89. You've got him at 94, in the 90s and the hundreds in the other places. And Marcus Yarns, product of Delaware, who is now moving into FBS, joining Conference American Athletic Conference, whatever they call it. Yeah, and so I've got him at 105. You did not have him ranked. He doesn't really show up in a lot of other places. Kind of a receiving back, a smaller guy. May make it as a kick returner, that kind of thing. But so I think that just like with the Bears, where the question was like who's getting the non-Smith touches, I think for us it's like who's the first person getting the non-Kamara touches, and how much of it will that be? Kamara's rushing efficiency has declined several years in a row, and he's really propped up by his receiving. And if you're in PPR, that's especially true. We now also have a possibly dog shit offense and dog shit quarterback. So that's going to affect the overall pie. So there may be, I don't know if Shuck is smart, a high check down percentage like we're used to with Kamara, but that pie might be pretty small. To me, when it comes to rushing, when it comes to giving Kamara a break, when it comes to if there's a Kamara injury, I think Neal is the guy. I think the coaches are going to like him. I think you can watch my YouTube short about Devin Neal here on the channel. I was big on him. He was like my RB 4 or 5 still pre-draft. I was stubborn about it. He fell to the 6th round. I think that's a little less meaningful in this year's draft. But I think the disagreement that we seem to have here is Neal versus Kendre Miller. So what are your thoughts on the Saints backfield?
Yeah, so a lot of obviously Kamara's a volume play through and through. Kamara's honestly one of my favorite options for redraft leagues just because of the volume, and I don't think they're in love with anybody else on the roster based on the CEH signing, like you said. So I do think it's Kamara's backfield 100%. Now, whether he gets the receiving work, like you said, is debatable, but I think given how terrible the offense is, they'd be silly not to run it through him, whether that's throwing him screens. But I do think Kendre Miller is, at least to me, I like him more. And with running backs like this, I shoot for upside more so than floor plays. And that's just kind of how I've started changing how I play it. And honestly, though, real quick, I think CEH is going to get more touches than we're happy with. I think he's going to get more than Akers. And I think he's going to eat into both Miller and Neal's touches.
Interesting. Okay.
It's as sad as it is to say, I didn't even rank him that high because I don't even want to think about drafting him. I think he's just going to be annoying. But it also really comes down between Miller and Neal. Miller was a 3rd-round pick. I know it's a different coach now, and Neal's a 6th. Like you said, it means a little less, but that is a pretty big difference. And Kendre Miller, I felt, was treated pretty unfairly by Dennis Allen. I really disliked Dennis Allen, but he disliked Kendre Miller with a passion.
Yeah,
and I got the vibe just from he didn't come out and say it, but I feel like Kendre Miller could have played some of the games if he needed to. But I think just given the situation, they were just quick to say, no, just sit out. And I don't know what's up with that, but I just think Kendre has more juice. He has more upside. And at round 19 in a startup, I'm definitely going to prefer him over Devin Neal at round 14. And it really just comes to, I think Kendre has more explosiveness. Like you said, Devin Neal, I think, might be the coach's favorite. I think he might get more touches, but I think he'll do less with the touches. But it's safe. He'll do the right thing. Kendre Miller, kind of like Kenneth Walker, I think he'll hit some big plays, long runs, but I think he'll also have some negatives where he might not make the right read, might not hit the right hole. And I don't think Neal will do that. I think he'll always get positives. But at the same time, at this point in the draft, I want upside. I want the guy who can hit the home run. And if Kamara goes out, I think both of their values will skyrocket. But I think Miller will be more valuable at that point. Just kind of, it could be wrong.
Yeah.
But
what if I argue that Devin Neal has more upside because he's a more complete player, and the floor actually is the upside?
I would say we haven't seen what Kendre Miller can do yet at the NFL level. I want to see what he can do catching the ball with screens and open space, and then I'll decide. I don't have him that far off. It's 6 spots, 56 and 62.
Yeah.
A lot can change at that, especially that late, but I just want to see what Miller can do. But if, like you said, if Miller's not doing much and he's not getting many targets and he's not, obviously Devin Neal is the more well-rounded player, I'll make that switch. But for now, I'm shooting for upside. And I just want to see what Miller can do with a coach that doesn't absolutely hate him.
So say we get reliable intel as training camp and the preseason moves forward that Kendre Miller is the number 2. He's he's ahead of Neal. Is this the type of guy where you're now going to say, okay, I'm interested, and I'll throw out 2/3 or I don't know a second and fab or whatever, and seek him out? Are you trying to get him as a throw-in in trades? Is it like I've got my shares and he's not exactly a target? Because I think when I'm looking at it from the best ball streets, I've definitely leaned into Devin Neal more. And I think I can easily pivot to drafting more Kendre the rest of the offseason at a price that won't increase too much. But that's best ball. That's not dynasty. So what would be your reaction if we got word that it's Kendre Miller?
I wouldn't try too hard to go after him just because it's still a really bad offense. But in certain leagues where I have because there's some leagues where I have a bunch of 3rds and 4ths. If that was the case, I'd definitely throw 2/3, even throw someone at the bottom of my bench on there. But I don't even think I'd go to give up a second. I'd honestly just try and use them as a throw-in if I don't want to give up a pick as a throw-in. Or if I don't want to, they don't want to give up picks, just use them as a throw-in. But I wouldn't be trying too hard to get him because it's still going to be a really bad offense. And unless Kamara got hurt, it'd be a different story. But with Kamara there, I'm still not really – I wouldn't try too hard. Honestly, I'd probably sell some of the shares I do have.
Assuming that the manager who has Kamara in a league, let's say, has held on to him uncomfortably long, because I think a lot of people would think oh, well, by this time, if you got Kamara, you're competing. You just haven't gotten rid of him. But maybe they held on to him too long. Maybe they're not competing. Maybe they want to trade him, and you want him as somebody who's competing, who's contending this year. What price are you willing to pay for Kamara? And again, we use picks as the currency, but think of the equivalent, whatever that player is in your league.
I wouldn't do a first. If I did a first, I would want a second or third back and a swap. But even then, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving that. Honestly, what I would try and do because I do have a good bit of Kendre Miller, I would try and swap them. Here, you can keep this backfield, do that, and then just add on I do Kendre Miller in a 3rd, maybe 2/3 for Kamara. I don't know. It should be really hard to go by him. He's 30. I have him ranked pretty high, but if I don't have him on my team, I don't really know with his injury history, his efficiency going down. I probably wouldn't even really try too hard.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. I think we're looking at probably a wider range of outcomes for Kendre Miller than Neal, but the juice,
for sure.
the juice
Yeah.
to get the higher ceiling perhaps, and then my boy Devin Neal. We'll see. We'll see. I will keep the light on, keep the candle lit for Devin Neal.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Kamara is a guy that I can't tell what I really want to do with him in redraft and best ball at the moment, so I don't have too much. But
it's a bad offense. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think they're really going to key in on Kamara and make other people beat him, Chris Olave is a good value, and so is Shaheed, but that's the only two people on the offense I'm actually outside of redraft targeting.
All right. Next backfield is Denver. Been really looking forward to talking about this one. So we've got RJ Harvey. He's 24 on a rookie contract through 2028. J.K. Dobbins just signed this offseason. He will be 27 in December and is a UFA after this season. Your boy, Audric Estime, still not 22. Going to be 22 in September on a rookie contract through 2027. Jaleel McLaughlin will turn 25 in September and is an RFA after this year. I've got them ranked Harvey 18, Dobbins 51. Harvey in a tier of 16 to 22, Dobbins in a tier of 51 to 57. Estime at 85 in a tier 85 to 92. McLaughlin 93 in a tier of 93 to 98. You've got them Harvey 20. Dobbins a little higher at 43 as opposed to my 41. Still holding the candle lit for Audric Estime at 61 versus my 85. And 85 for McLaughlin versus my 93. We're in the ballpark with the aggregator sites when it comes to Harvey. His startup ADP is 606. It was a little higher than I thought it would be. At RB 18, you can get Dobbins in a startup around 15. He's in the 40s in the aggregates. So I'm definitely below consensus on that. Estime you can get in the 19th round in a startup. Seems to be hovering in the 70s, kind of in between me and you. And McLaughlin round 21 in a startup, late 70s and 80s. So I'm below consensus on those two. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this was, yes, were we probably a little too steamy with Harvey for a little bit? Yeah, probably. But I think there was also an overreaction to the Dobbins signing. And I think people were like, oh, Dobbins, oh, yeah, that hurts Harvey, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't mean nothing for Harvey, but I'm of the opinion it means almost nothing for Harvey, right? Dobbins is going to, while he can catch passes and he can pass block, which is a weakness of Harvey's, the pass blocking, he's more of a, death knell to the Audric Estime touches. You know what I mean? And this is where the pie idea, comes in, where we already had, and if you're doing projections, let's say on your little spreadsheets, you have a set of non-Harvey touches, right? And now Dobbins comes in, right? What are most of those Dobbins touches going to do? They're going to affect the Estimes and even the McLaughlins of the world, right? And to me, that was the team sending the signal that we need insurance, we need a body, we need somebody who can, be competent in the pass blocking. We want somebody who's a competent veteran in the beginning of the year, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, Harvey's still the guy to have. Probably a little overpriced in some circles, but I think with the Sean Payton running back passing, right? He's the kind of guy who can, even in games when he gets fewer touches than Dobbins, be better on those fewer touches because of efficiency and because we play in PPR. Dobbins, listen, like he had a pretty good early season last year and then was pretty meh after that. He's been derailed by, major injuries, and I wish it didn't happen to him. I was rooting for him, but he's not washed, but I just don't see him as like this huge threat to this dynamic back that Peyton was like in love with, right? I think he's more of an impact on the other guys. Couple more things. I have heard, and again, it is what it is. These are rumors that even though Peyton after the draft was saying, "Oh, I knew Genty wasn't going to come to us, and I fell in love with Harvey. I was like, this is my guy." I think if Jahdae Barron, the cornerback, wasn't on the clock at pick 20, the Broncos would have taken TreVeyon Henderson. And we'd be having a much different conversation about TreVeyon Henderson than we're having now.
Yep.
Let's set that aside, though. But so, and now recently, a Broncos reporter said, and this I love these types of quotes, right? Dobbins is the starter. Harvey will no doubt get a lot of touches, and McLaughlin is Peyton's most reliable, or the guy that he trusts the most. So it complimented all three of them. What is that supposed to mean? Like, and then people take that and run with that as like, oh, Dobbins is the starter. Told you, RJ Harvey guys. Yeah, I mean, the starter in an NFL backfield when there's usually only one running back on the field means maybe he gets the first couple plays and the next play is a fucking wheel route to RJ Harvey, and that's where the points come from. Like, spare me with that. Anyway, so that's my big rant on the Broncos, right? In the sense that I think Dobbins hurts Estime and McLaughlin much more than he impacts Harvey. Some other people don't think so. The market is more or less in line with me, even though I'm a little lower than the market on Dobbins and McLaughlin and Estime. Jamie commenting in the chat, no Blake Watson. He is in italics at the bottom of the slide, which means he does exist and he's on the depth chart. He's a guy that I loved last year too, just like Kyle Senra did. There just seems to be no room for him. All right, I've talked way too much. Josh, tell me what you think of the Broncos backfield.
Yeah, so first off, I think I'm a little too high on RJ Harvey. He's someone that I didn't even come close to drafting this year just based on where he was going and who else was around him in the drafts. But that being said, the way Sean Payton is talking about him, I think he is going to be the one that gets the most touches and the most opportunities. Though the main reason that I do agree, though, that Dobbins is definitely going to eat into SMA's touches more than anyone else, even more than McLaughlin. But at the same time, with SMA being only 22, he had an injury last year that kind of derailed him and kind of threw off him getting touches. It seemed like he had like a good week or two and then got hurt and then just didn't really ever get back to form. So I think as long as he's healthy, we really haven't even seen what he can do. And Dobbins, his right leg, he's had a fibula fracture, grade 3 ankle sprain. He tore his hamstring, grade 3 LCL tear, ACL tear separate, and then his Achilles, and then an MCL sprain last year. He's really good, and I've loved J.K. Dobbins, and I wish none of this happened. He's one of my favorite running backs, but at the same time, we got to look at him for what he is. He's injury prone, and with SMA being 22 and him being 27, the older he gets with those injuries, I just think the efficiency is just going to continue to fall off. I do have him at 43 because I think he's going to get more touches than people think, especially early on in the year. I just think that's going to decline and it's going to fall off. And if J.K. Dobbins does come out and is the starter, I'm selling immediately. I don't really have too many shares, but I have him ranked higher because I do think he's going to get a lot of touches early on in the year, especially if Harvey comes out, makes a mistake. The way Sean Payton is, he could fumble once, and we might not see him for 2 games. That's just kind of how he's been in the past. And I also wouldn't look too far into coach speak with him. He tries too hard to be deceiving. It's almost to the point of being annoying.
Yeah,
so he could just be saying stuff to reporters just to blow smoke up their ass for a competitive advantage. So yeah. I don't pay attention to a single thing Payton says until week 1. We see what's out there. I hate the guy, but he's a good coach. So
it's true. It is true. I think if Harvey gets hurt, Dobbins.
I think Estime has the most to gain.
Really? Okay, because I was going to say Dobbins absorbs some of those touches, and McLaughlin absorbs the receiving type touches. Whereas if Dobbins gets hurt, then Estime is the guy that gains the most. So tell me why I'm wrong.
I just don't see them giving, especially tough between the tackles carries to Dobbins, just given his age, his injury history. I don't see him getting more than consistently 12 carries a game. And I think if he has that throughout a season, more than that, it's not going to last too long. So I think if something goes down to Harvey, they're going to need someone to come in and take some of those early down. And it might not be pretty carries, it might not really relate to too much fantasy value. But I think Estimate, given his size, he has more speed than 4.71. He has great burst. I think he's going to get the most of the touches just because they want Dobbins to be healthy longer through the year.
Okay. The tweet by Zara that I mentioned before said like too many people try to do the Gibson Montgomery, in every backfield, particularly like the Ben Johnson, in Chicago now and wherever his coaching tree goes. And I get that, and he's right, and in some ways we've kind of also had the thunder and lightning concept for a while as well that even predates that. And when we look at the history of Sean Payton backfields and how they've scored in fantasy, how much they've gotten, receiving targets, we've seen multiple backs be fantasy relevant. Among Ingram, Kamara, Pierre Thomas, or and so I don't think that I have to worry that that they can't support two fantasy relevant guys. And when people talk about, J.K. Dobbins can pass block and R.J. Harvey, needs to work on that, etc., it's true, right? But Javonte Williams, in the shape that he was in last year, and again, talk about a guy who had so much promise and the injuries, right? Got 70 targets out of the backfield last year. 55 of them came on first and second down. So if R.J. Harvey can't pass block, he's still going to get early down targets. This is what this offense does, and it's what the quarterback does, right? I mean, people, I think, overblow the whole bubble screen bow kind of thing, right? But he just, all right, I don't have it. All right, I'll throw it away or I'll check it down. That's what he does, right? We're going to get those looks. And when we think about that, for me, the guy who's going to benefit the most there is Harvey. Do I think he's a talented running back that I had at RB 9-ish pre-draft who is being propped up by draft capital and landing spot more? Yes, but there's a reason we do that, right? There's a reason that we're more excited than if he ended up in some other kind of offense or some other kind of depth chart. And I think it's legitimate. It's possible we steamed it a little too high, but I definitely think, there's room for him to be very, very productive in a Sean Payton offense. You mentioned that you didn't get much of him in rookie drafts. I know there were some people who were taking him as early as 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, and okay, 1.9 I can get with. But anyway, right now, right, I've looked at some trades, and there's not a lot of people that are able to get him for a single second, I think, but there are people who have probably benefited from a bit of a dip in the price with the Dobbins signing. Most people, I think, who drafted him in a rookie draft pretty much want to hold on to him and see how it works out. That's kind of the way our minds work. Mm-hmm. And if they're like me, they look for confirmation bias after the Dobbins signing that they're right. Any of these guys, any of the four there on the screen, what price do you want to pay for these guys?
Harvey, I would only give a second. I wouldn't give anything more than that just because I was kind of out on him. I saw him as an early second value in rookie drafts anyways. And the main reason I didn't get him was if I have a late first, I'd much rather go after Loveland, Luther Burden, Jaden Higgins than I would R.J. Harvey because he's already 24 years old. I forgot to mention that. Estimate is still 2 years younger than him, and he's already been in the league. So that's also a hit on him. I would give a second for Harvey. Dobbins, I'm probably not going to try and buy. If I have him on my team, good. And honestly, J.K. Dobbins is going to be one of the better sells because if, say, he does come out, especially week 1 or 2, get most of the touches and they kind of ease Harvey in, Harvey will become a buy and J.K. Dobbins will become a sell. And at that point, I'll be willing to buy in on Harvey. And I think you can get him for a second then. Estimate, while I would give a third and feel good about it, I know I probably wouldn't have to do that. So I could probably try and do like a fourth and maybe a small player. Or maybe just a fourth. I'd try first. Because he's valued a lot lower than I am. So I'm not going to pay what I think he's worth if I don't have to. McLaughlin, I'm not buying at all. I have him on some teams, but it was waiver wire pickup, and I'm just going to hold. He's not really going to be a sell. He's just probably going to sit on my roster for a while.
All right. So this backfield, when we were texting back and forth about, the backfields that we wanted to do, I gave a list of like, oh shit, half the league, and Pittsburgh wasn't on there. And you suggested the Pittsburgh backfield. So I'm just going to kind of read off a couple of things and let you take it away, because I was surprised you wanted to talk about this, because no backfield is clear cut, but for me it was pretty clear cut. So we've got Caleb Johnson. He'll be 22 in August. Just got drafted in the 3rd round. Rookie contract through 28. I've got him ranked at 19. Josh at 16. You can get him in the 6'11" at RB20 in startups. Our rankings are pretty even with everybody else's. Jaylen Warren, a guy that I love, that I just wish I could rank higher, at 38 in a tier of 34 to 42. You've got him a little lower at 42, pretty much in line with rankings elsewhere, and an ADP of 1209 at the RB38. Gainwell, actually younger than Jaylen Warren, and I was surprised when I was researching this that Kenny Gainwell is younger than Jaylen Warren, but he'll be a UFA after this year. He was signed after a few years with the Eagles. I've got him down at 100. You've got him much higher at 78. He seems to be floating around in the 90s elsewhere. And then, of course, the ageless wonder who has pictures of Arthur Smith with little boys, Cordero Patterson, age 34, UFA after this year. I've got him ranked at 124. Pretty much nobody else has him ranked or in the ADP system. Still orbiting the Steelers roster, Trey Sermon, Evan Hull, another guy who I thought had some promise as a cheeky kind of all-around backup, but destroyed his knee, and someone with the last name Hurleman who exists. All right, you start off this one. Why did you want to put this one on the list?
Well, first of all, it's a few things. I love Caleb Johnson. He's probably the running back I was most higher than market on. And honestly, I think I'm going to move him up a little higher than 16. Actually, have him one ahead of Christian McCaffrey. And it also goes to Gainwell. I think Gainwell's being slept on quite a bit. I mean, as you say, he's in the 90s. And at 78, I honestly wanted to put him a little higher. And I think he's going to eat into Jaylen Warren's touches a little more than people are expecting. It's not just because of the age. I just think Kenneth Gainwell's – I think he's really good. I just think he was on an Eagles team that was really stacked. Didn't really get all the touches. When he did, I thought he was good with them. Caleb Johnson, this is the perfect fit for him, and I think he's going to be what the Steelers wanted in Najee. And I think the only reason they didn't give Najee more touches because he wasn't super efficient with him, because it wasn't a good the right system for him. Najee, I think right now is a great buy. I think he's going to fit in perfectly on that team. But I think it's just all go for Caleb Johnson. He's on his rookie contract. Warren's 27. And I think Warren's kind of like Tony Pollard. If he gets too many touches, I think that peak efficiency is going to really fall off. And the whole allure with him is going to really take a hit. So I think it's going to be outside of Johnson. And I think it's going to be a mix more than people think. I do love Jaylen Warren. He's going to get a lot of pass catching opportunities. That's going to be the one thing that keeps him on the field. But Evan Hull being there, he's also can do the same thing. I think if he makes the roster, it's going to be a lot more annoying. But I just think Gainwell is going to get a lot more touches. He's younger, and I think he's got more juice overall than Jaylen Warren.
Interesting.
But it's mostly I just wanted to hype up Caleb Johnson. I wasn't able to get him a ton in rookie drafts as much as I wanted. But in startups, I'm definitely going to be buying in the 6th round. I'll probably even get him late 5th as my RB1 some if I want to wait.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting choice as an RB1 in a startup, right? Because, he's got what we think is going to be a reliable floor, volume based, and but you're getting it at like 5 years younger than you would be if you were trying to draft a lot of the other guys that have a similar projectable volume. I was surprised because for me it's like Caleb Johnson is Warren, and then it's kind of like everybody else. Everybody else is kind of like, I don't know, like in the mix, insurance, special teams. Gainwell is really good at special teams. And Jalen Warren is a guy who had just displayed just really great peripherals when healthy, and he was kind of starting to become that Tony Pollard where it's like, can we get him at least a few more touches? And I think last year he was dinged up. Like he started the year injured. I think it was a hamstring, and I think he never really kind of got fully healthy throughout the year. And I said I would like to rank him higher because I honestly think he's, of the three that aren't Caleb Johnson, easily to me, or maybe not easily, but the most talented, most dynamic of the running backs. And if I were a coach, he's the guy that I would want to give touches. But maybe I have to rethink the Kenny Gainwell thing. I think he gave me some food for thought tonight. When it comes to Caleb Johnson, I was kind of lower on him than most coming into things. I think I kind of have let that maybe stick with me a little too much. I think when it comes to college, there are some things you can point out that are really great as far as numbers go, especially when it comes to broken tackles. You can also say, well, he was running in a very run-heavy offense with a very good offensive line, 1 year wonder-ish kind of profile. He just to me wasn't as talented as the guys that I had above him. At the same time, I said, you know what? If he lands on a team that has a good offensive line, runs outside zone, and I can think that he's going to get volume, I should probably bump him up. He kind of did land on a team like that, and I don't think that I've correspondingly bumped him. I think I'm anchored in that like Caleb Johnson kind of way of looking at it. And I too kind of didn't really get much of him because I think people were a little more in love with him than I was. So maybe a guy that I should probably lean into in the best ball portfolio a little bit more. So Gainwell then sounds like an interesting throw in a trade for you or a waiver wire pickup.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And honestly, kind of like the last one, I think Gainwell going there hurts Warren's touches more than Caleb Johnson. I don't think it's going to affect Caleb Johnson at all. Because I was just looking, Kenny Gainwell has more yards per reception than Jalen Warren does, and their efficiency on running is not that much different. Warren's a little more efficient. I mean, obviously the Eagles have a good line, but at the same time, I think Gainwell's just as good at receiving, and I don't know if he's better in space, but being really good at special teams like that does, they put you there because you're good in space. So I think if he can get the ball in open space, he's just as good as Warren. And I think that's going to eat into his touches more than Caleb Johnson. Because the only other guy that hurt Caleb Johnson is Cordell Patterson, maybe Trey Sermon for that type of early down work that they really want to give. And I mean, you're going to give a 34-year-old 15 handoffs a game?
Well, if you're Arthur Smith, yes.
He might. Yeah, he just might.
All four of these guys will get 10 touches each. That's running behind an offensive line plus 3 tight ends.
Johnny Smith and Cordell Patterson must have an agreement with Arthur Smith or something because they just follow him. It's kind of crazy,
man. They've got pictures. The same way that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent working on behalf of the Israeli government on a blackmail scheme that also involved the CIA. Cordell Patterson and Johnny Smith have the goods on Arthur Smith.
That's funny. Most coaches, I'd say, no, that's not fair, but fuck Arthur Smith.
The thing is, he designs a good run game. He just doesn't use people the way that we want, and he's a prick and a nepo baby. So even the positives about him are so hard to acknowledge when he's such a fucking prick, kind of like his quarterback.
That's going to be a fun team. I really was hoping Pickens stayed on that team to see Arthur Smith, Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and Pickens be in the same room.
Right.
That would have been great.
All right, and our fifth and final backfield, just in case we don't get a second episode out of this topic, I wanted to make sure that we also talked about perhaps the most ambiguous in the original sense of the term when it comes to prices and ADP that are compressed and close together, and that is the Jaguars backfield. Bashal Tutin, drafted in the 4th round. He is 23 years old, obviously the rookie contract through 2028. I've got him at running back 20 in a tier of 16 to 22. He's in that tier with Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey. I think I have Judkins in that tier as well. You've got him at 32, going for 2, and the other aggregate sites as well as Dynasty Data Lab have him in the 30s, so I'm confidently ahead of consensus on this. You can get him at 1107 in a startup. Travis Etienne, who is someone who I've been bearish on compared to a lot of other people, and I'm starting to think it's one of those situations where, well, now maybe he's been dinged too much. I've got him at 30 at a tier of 28 to 33. You've got him at 31 because you are a coward and have 2 Jaguars running backs ranked back-to-back, going for 2 KTC, Fantasy Calc, and DDL, all in the late 20s or 30s. You can get him at 1006-ish in an ADP environment, so 1 round ahead of Tutin, which is interesting. Tank Bigsby, who some people think, listen, he had such a great year last year and those big runs, and maybe he's the guy that benefits the most, and Tutin's going to be the Lightning, and this guy's going to be the Thunder, and Etienne is going to be more of like a mix him in kind of thing. He's 24 in August, a rookie contract through 2026. As much as I've been bullish on Bigsby compared to other people, I've got him down at 52. To me, I'm telling the story that this is an Etienne and Tutin show, with Bigsby really only filling in when it comes to like short yardage or goal line. You've got him higher at 39 because you are a coward and have 3 running backs ranked within the 30s on the same team.
Same tier.
Going for 2 has him at 44. KTC 39, Fantasy Calc a little more in line with me at 50. But again, Fantasy Calc gets their rankings through aggregating trades. And if you're not trading a lot for Tank Bigsby, it's going to be hard for his ranking to go up. You can get him at the 1404 in startups at running back 45. So I'm definitely seem to be low on Tank Bigsby, which I never thought is a sentence that I would say, but here we are. LeQuint Allen, a guy that I kind of liked more than some other people coming out of college. He was a 7th rounder, 21 in August on the rookie contract. Mostly his upside is in pass catching. There's been the usual, we're going to put this running back in the slot talk with LeQuint Allen, but we get that with a lot of running backs in the offseason. I've got him at 94. You don't have him ranked. KTC and Fantasy Calc in the 80s as well as in ADP. There is also Jaquindon Jackson, sort of a more of a plotting type runner, rookie. I believe he was a UDFA. And then according to the Fantasy Pros rankings platform, Louis Reese-Zemet, who was the rugby guy that was originally on the Chiefs, is on that roster, but according to the Our Lads depth chart, he is not. But either way, they are in italics and exist. This is the market telling us a story of we don't know what the fuck's going to happen, right? We've got, Tutin drafted, certainly explosive, but, has some problems when it comes to vision, bounces outside too much, can catch passes, so he's good there, but not like the best pass blocker. Obviously, the fumbling issues have been there. Then there's Etienne, who's been on the decline, especially when it comes to like efficiency, had to really become a volume sponge to even be relevant. Remains decent at pass catching, and when you get him in space, is better than trying to make him a lead back between the tackles. Then there's Tank Bigsby, who is the most, for lack of a better word, rugged of the others, and more of the between the tackles guy, and a guy who, when it comes to peripherals and some eye test folks, Bigsby was the better back last year than Etienne, and some people are betting on him because hey, he's the cheapest of the big three. And then we'll see with LeQuint Allen. But yeah, the market doesn't seem to know what to do with these guys. I seem more confident that Tutin, and to me, it's similar to Harvey. It's like who's the guy who is going to get, who's the younger explosive guy, who's the guy that's going to benefit from the receiving game the most in PPR, who has what's his name from Fantasy Points, Graham Barfield, created this metric called yards created, and Tootin just showed up really, really well on it relative to some guys who people have priced similarly. I just really think he's the guy to lean into, and that they'll mix in Etienne in a way that is based more on some perimeter stuff and some receiving. So I think all three of these guys are going to eat, and it's going to be a little annoying. But I'm clearly got my chips in on one, and clearly got Bigsby lowest of the three, and yours seem to be more even on these guys. So talk to me about the sense that you're making of this Jaguars backfield.
Yeah, so I started off by who I think will have the most fantasy points at the end of the year, and I do think that's Travis Etienne. I think I'll have the most touches, most points. That's why I haven't ranked the highest. The reason I'm lower on Tootin is while he does have a lot of like positive traits, I think the weaknesses that I saw in him when I was going through the rookie process, ball security, decisiveness on hitting lanes. Like you said, he bounces outside too much. Ball security is like one of the main things that can get you benched and get you in the doghouse. We saw that with Tank Bigsby. Now I know it's a different coaching staff, so I'm not saying that's going to be the same. But if you're a rookie and you like have a fumble in like your first game or two, they're going to knock your touches for a little while. And I think the way Tootin bounced it outside, I think it worked really well in college for him. But I think at the NFL level, he's going to have a harder time doing that. So I think he's going to really have to learn how to read his blocks. Especially through the tackles, between the tackles. But I also think that Liam Cohen is going to scheme him ways through motion to get him in the open space. So that's why I do still have him high. I think he has the most overall upside, but I also think he has the chance to – he might have also the lowest floor of the three that we're talking about here. Also, if things go poorly, if he gets in the doghouse, or if Bigsby just comes out and looks just as good as he did last year, I think those Etienne and Bigsby will get more touches than the rookie, especially since Etienne being out after 25. I think they're going to get what they can out of him, especially on early downs. So it really just goes, I think Bigsby has the highest floor. Tootin has the highest ceiling, but I think the most likely outcome of who's the best back in this backfield is Trevor Etienne. But based on my rankings, I have no fucking clue. So, yeah, I just put it the way I did. Tootin has a few too many flaws that he could easily work out. It's not those things that I'm like he's screwed, but his flaws are what could get you benched and get you as the RB3 in an offense.
But very much so. I like the way that you unpack that, and I think the story that I'm telling is who is the most likely among these guys to gain 2 rounds of startup ADP next year?
It's definitely 2, yeah.
Probably 2, right? So that's kind of where the basket my eggs are in at the moment. I am mixing in Etienne a little bit in best ball because I do think his price is pretty good relative to hey, he could work out. He could be the guy that gets the most touches kind of thing.
He's still got juice too. He's fast. He can still make long runs.
And if they preserve him, and don't give him the volume, that's going to be big for him because we've seen the efficiency fall off with volume. We've seen the efficiency, we've seen him get dinged up. Was it 2023 where there was a bye week and then an injury or the injury in the bye week, and the entire second half of the season he was it was a different player, and they were giving carries to Ernest Johnson, So
yep, yeah, that was 23.
Yeah, so you kind of want to see them preserve him more. The question then, of course, is I think one of the big questions for the NFL this year is what is the offense going to look like under Liam Cohen, right? And if that maybe is another reason I'm leaning into Tootin because I'm who's a guy that could be the Bucky here, and to me it's Tootin, right? He's got good evasion numbers when it comes to tackles. He's good when it comes to chunk plays and pretty good receiver. Maybe not as good a receiver as Bucky, but I don't know. You don't want to pattern match 1-to-1. Who's the Bucky Irving of this offense? Because Liam Cohen's there, but that's another reason I'm into it. It's all right, what running back magic is Cohen going to work? Tootin would benefit the most from that. And Tootin would benefit, he's kind of like the anti-fragile play, right? When it comes to, pick one guy who gets injured on this list, he probably benefits the most from any injury on this list.
Yeah, looking back though, and you actually made a good point. Looking back for last year at Liam Cohen, these three backs are all better than Rashad White. So, and even then, Bucky Irving, while his efficiency was really good and his numbers were good, his usage was never over 60%. Liam Cohen still gave Rashad White a lot of carries, a lot of passes. So I don't know if we can really look into that. I just know that these three backs are better than what he had in Tampa Bay. So it might just be all three of them get a lot of touches, and who's the most efficient is going to be the best. And that still might be Tootin. I just think with ETN being out after this year for 25, I think if they're going to run anyone into the ground, it's going to be him, and they're going to save Tootin. And that's just kind of how I've seen NFL teams do it. If you're on your last year contract, they're going to get what they can out of you if they don't want to re-sign you. And I don't think he's going to be re-signed.
Yeah, I think look at Najee, right? They didn't pick up his fifth-year option, and then he got a lot of volume last year.
Najee's going to smash this year. I'm telling you.
Oh, come on.
We'll have to talk about that one and the Tampa Bay backfield because I have some thoughts on Bucky.
Okay.
Bucky's one of my bigger sells right now.
I mean, his price has gone pretty high. So.
In our best ball dynasty league, it's the only league I have him in for dynasty. I put him on the block because if he's RB7, I can get a first plus. I'm gonna do that in a heartbeat.
Interesting. Okay. So speaking of next time, oh, by the way, speaking of Tampa Bay, I'm starting to sense, kind of a mini drumbeat for Sean Tucker, and and Rashad White made some kind of comment on social media about like this being his last year in Tampa or something like that. So if Tucker's out there on the waiver wire and you can get him thrown in a trade, he might be a guy to look at. He's got more bulk and between the tackles ability than Irving, and he's got more juice and burst than Rashad White. And I think he could be a guy that they give more touches to this year.
Yeah, Tucker's knock was he runs into the back of his lineman, but so does Rashad White, and at least Sean Tucker's fast. So, as much as I talked shit about Sean Tucker when he first came out, just because I thought his price was kind of crazy, I spent $100 out of my $100 in fab on him last year when he hit in one of my leagues where I was in first place and my team was good. I just needed running backs. I spent all my fab on Sean Tucker. Don't regret it.
Thanks for the support in the chat, Kyle and Jamie tonight. Good to see you. On Najee, by the way, before we close this out, are you aware of people kind of going apeshit over his eye, or that didn't come across your news desk?
I saw it. I'm waiting to hear more about that.
Yeah,
that's why I'm glad we didn't do it this week. I want to see what happens with that because it is alarming. And if there is damage to that, it might seem obvious. So if you can't see well, you won't be able to see the hole. But at the same time, like seeing baseball players like fix their vision, it makes them so much better. It's a little different, obviously different sports, but at the same time, if there's something serious there, it's definitely gonna be a
yeah. And the thing is, I said losing their shit because I think there isn't much there. I mean.
Right now I don't think so.
It looks like they said superficial injury and he'll be ready to start the season.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Like we have no other reason to believe otherwise, right? And obviously you don't want him to miss a lot of training camp. You want him to, learn the new offense or whatever with it. But come on, he's a veteran. It's just like, here's the ball, run, be big, be hard to tackle.
Greg Roman's the offensive coordinator there. Can't be that much different than what he's ran before.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so next time we have a long list of teams we could possibly pull from. I think Dallas is really interesting. I think on the screen, if you can't see or you're listening, Dallas, Kansas City, Giants, Rams, Cleveland, Chargers, Dolphins, Packers, Bengals, Commanders, and Jets, and now throwing into the mix Tampa, according to Josh, which I do think is interesting now that there's kind of this drumbeat for Tucker. So we hope to get an episode or two more out of this topic. It may be next week. And if we do, it's going to be pre-recorded because next week on Saturday, I will be at the live Scott Fish Bowl New York City live draft at Legends in Manhattan. and having a good old time there. And yeah, so please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. When it comes to going for 2.com has articles and rankings. We have a Discord. There's a link in Jeff's bio. There's a link in the Going for 2 bio. There's a link probably on the website still. Discord's free, lots of channels, lots of topics. People talking all the time. Lots of Scott Fishbowl stuff, including ADP and there was more mocks before the drafts started live. Yeah, and Josh, where are you going to be tomorrow and other stuff to plug?
Yeah, so tomorrow we'll be at Sports and Social. It's downtown Washington, D.C., doing the Scott Fishbowl live draft. I haven't done a single mock. I know basic scoring what it is. I know like the tight ends get 3.5 points of reception. I haven't actually looked. I will at some point before I draft tomorrow, maybe. It depends if we pregame before we start tomorrow. But either way, I'm just going to wing it. I'm going to have fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Jeff's there, Joe Bond, a bunch of cool people. I'll be doing that tomorrow. I'll be trying to tweet about that. I'm really bad about that. I also have social anxiety, so I might just be sitting in the corner of my phone in my pocket. But either way, that's where I'll be. You can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut, ROTONAUT. And yeah, I haven't really been tweeting much, but I just updated my Dynasty rankings. I'll probably try and do some redraft rankings also week to week. All that'll be at goingfor2.com.
All right, you can find my rankings, as I said, at goingfor2.com. You can find me on Twitter at ffjunkie_. You can find me at Blue Sky at Flesh Farm Leftover, which is a fish lyric. Kyle mentioning here in the chat.
They have lyrics?
Was I gonna go to fish? Or was I going to? You're going to say that every time. I'll fucking kill you.
I'm going to every time.
Figured Brian was going to Fish or Scott Fishbowl. Fish is going to be in the New York area later this month. The guy I know has tickets. I don't think I'll be able to go based on my schedule, but we'll see. But yeah, they've been ripping it up in summer tour. Everybody should check it out. They've been dropping some YouTube videos and that kind of thing. They are cooking. They are on fire. They are in their 50s and 60s, playing better than they've ever played probably before, and it's really, really great to see. Yeah. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. That's going to be a wrap for us.
Yeah, go Irish.
Oh, okay. You know what?
Trash.
Jeremiah Love getting some love.
Oh my God, he's gonna be so good.
Jaden Greathouse getting some love. Some people.
Hey, I'll say this about Notre Dame really quick. Marcus Freeman's doing a great job. Their recruiting class is top 5 for the first time that I can remember. I'm very excited about the future. It's going to be great.
All right, folks. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for spending some time with us on Saturday night. And man, I was this close to closing with Death to America, but we'll have to pick something else. Primus sucks.
I'll say, yeah. I mean, you said it. I'm not pushing back on it. We're here.